Since the Cold War, the federal government has been preparing for a worst-case scenario, a nuclear attack or other strike. Those preps are carried out in secret and paid for with billions of your tax dollars. The problem, some claim so-called continuity of government plans aren't adequate. And as Full Measure contributor Joce Sterman reports, we have no idea where those billions of tax dollars are going.
September 11, 2001, the nation is under attack. In New York, the Twin Towers are on fire after two airliners fly into the buildings. In Washington, the Pentagon burns. And in Sarasota, Florida, President George Bush leaves a classroom of school children to begin a series of flights on Air Force One to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning.
Then to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, before returning to Washington later that afternoon. Vice President Dick Cheney is whisked to a secure underground location. The government went into survival mode.
None of these programs worked in the way that we had hoped that they were.
Garrett Graff is author of a book called Raven Rock, the story of the U.S. government's secret plan to save itself while the rest of us die.
The only time that we have ever paid real close attention to these plans is after realizing in an emergency they don't work.
To you, does that highlight the need for even more transparency?
It highlights both the need for the transparency, but also more exercises.
All the things we believe in are in great danger.
Continuity of government plans have been around since President Truman and the dawn of the atomic age. Each administration has added their own touches. The Greenbrier, the secret bunker built beneath a resort that would have housed members of Congress, was built on Eisenhower's watch. John F. Kennedy's press secretary, Pierre Salinger, organized what was called a doomsday press corps. And along with additions, Graff discovered big concerns.
I mean, this is a shadow government that we want as a country, but we don't know where they are, we don't know how many there are, we don't know what we're spending on them, and we don't have any real idea about whether it would work.
Graff's book highlighted a DOD report that came to light during JFK's time in office. It called continuity of government plans severely lacking. President Carter's team called it a worry to all familiar with it. 9/11 also exposed major flaws in the system, from communications problems on Air Force One to even the heroic actions of leaders themselves.
Donald Rumsfeld at the Pentagon did exactly the wrong thing for these plans and procedures by going to the crash site, by helping to evacuate the wounded, literally carrying stretchers out of the Pentagon, which was an amazing thing for him to do from a leadership perspective, and exactly the wrong thing for him to do from a constitutional perspective. And this is the central tension of these plans.
Graff estimates as much as $2 billion a year is allocated for continuity plans. But that's an estimate at best that he determined by looking at costs piecemeal in black budgets spread across government agencies, from the Department of Defense to the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Actual spending is even hidden from the Government Accountability Office and the lawmakers who approve it, sparking floor speeches like this one from Representative Peter DeFazio in 2007.
Or maybe there's something there that's outrageous. The American people need their elected representatives to review this plan for the continuity of government.
Gentleman's time has expired.
You know, we found that there were many members who really, while they understood it was a problem, didn't want to consider all of the worst-case scenarios.
John Fortier led a commission established after 9/11 to examine the legal and constitutional questions that must be answered to ensure continuity of government.
It was in a way like people avoiding writing their will, not wanting to think about their own demise.
Among the commission's recommendations, a constitutional amendment to speed filling vacant House seats after a massive crisis, a plan considering people outside D.C. for the line of succession. 16 years later, after research, congressional momentum, and 2 official reports, none of the group's recommendations have been implemented.
We really have not fixed our fundamental problem. The House of Representatives still today, if something big were to happen, many members killed, we would not have a good way of getting that body back into being for 2 to 6 months at the time where you really need that body.
And what do you think is the biggest consequence of not having this plan ironed out before something happens?
Well, I think the biggest problem is chaos.
So formulating a plan, Fortier says, even an imperfect one, is better than none to keep the government going when a crisis occurs. I'm Joce Sterman for Full Measure.